What should a father do when his own son tells him to pack his bags for a nursing home only 5 days after open-heart surgery? That question still rattles inside my chest, louder than the machines that once kept me alive. I came home from the hospital weak, stitched together, grateful just to breathe without the sting of tubes. The doctor's warning echoed in my ears. Rest. Avoid stress. Take it slow. Yet the first words I heard under my own roof were not welcome home. Dad. They were a command to get out before I became their burden. Liam stood in the hallway, arms folded, his wife Claire behind him with a look that could curdle milk. I had only asked for a glass of water. My throat was dry, my legs still unsteady, and the house that I built felt like it had shifted under me. Liam's answer was simple, sharp. We're not your caretakers. Don't expect us to wait on you. I gripped the arm of the chair to keep myself from collapsing. My body trembled. But it wasn't just the pain of healing. It was disbelief. This was the boy whose nightmares I soothed at midnight, whose baseball games I cheered through rain and cold, whose tuition drained my savings because I believed in his future. And now, my future in his house was reduced to an inconvenience. The water I poured myself tasted bitter. Not from the tap, but from betrayal. My daughter-in-law smirked as if I had proven their point. So why bother them? In that moment I realized something devastating. I was not recovering in my family's home. I was trespassing in theirs. I set the glass down carefully, as though it carried the weight of every sacrifice I had ever made. Then I looked at them, my son and his wife, partners in coldness, and asked myself a question no father should ever have to consider. If the children you raise decide you are disposable, what do you do with the years you have left? I woke the next morning still sore from the hospital bed, and the tension that filled this house like smoke. The stitches in my chest pulled whenever I breathed too deeply. My arms felt heavy, my legs weaker than I could ever remember. A man who once worked 12-hour shifts in construction now struggled to lift a glass without trembling. The humiliation was sharper than the pain. The doctor had said the first weeks after surgery would be fragile. No sudden movements, no heavy lifting. Avoid stress whenever possible. But how could I avoid stress when I lived with people who looked at me as if I were an intruder? Every sigh from Liam, every cold glance from Claire, pressed harder on my chest than any surgeon's knife. I tried to steady myself by remembering the years before. Memories rose like photographs scattered across a table. Early mornings when I carried Liam on my shoulders to watch the sunrise over Lake Michigan. Afternoons when I rushed from a shift to catch even the last inning of his Little League games. Nights when fever kept him shivering. And I sat by his bed until the sweat dried. Those moments had been the definition of fatherhood for me, sacrifice without a second thought. I gave more than money. I gave time, strength, and dreams I once had for myself. I turned down promotions that required travel because I didn't want him to feel alone. I drained savings to cover his tuition at a college he later dropped out of when he claimed the pressure was too much. I even co-signed loans for his business ventures, patching holes when he fell behind. Selling my truck to cover debts he promised he'd repay. Now, as I looked across the kitchen table, the same boy I raised avoided my eyes. His wife scrolled her phone, tapping her nails on the screen as if my presence was background noise. When I asked for help reaching the pill bottle the doctor prescribed, Claire said, "You know where the cabinet is." Then she turned the volume up on the television. The cruelty was not in the words themselves, but in the ease with which they said them, as though kindness was some currency I could no longer afford. I realized with a shudder that they did not see me as a man recovering from surgery. They saw me as a responsibility they hadn't signed up for. I pushed the chair back slowly, forcing myself to walk toward the counter. Every step, like dragging chains. The kitchen floor blurred beneath my vision. But I held on because I refused to let them see me collapse. If I fell, they would not lift me. They would complain about the mess. The pills rattled in my hand like dice before a cruel game. I swallowed them dry, my throat burning, my pride in tatters. I stared out the window where the oak tree I planted 30 years ago still stood tall. Branches stretched wide. That tree had weathered storms, lightning, and winters that split weaker trunks in half. It survived because its roots went deep. I whispered to myself, I must be like that tree. I will not break. But the ache inside me was not just from my chest. It was from the realization that I was living among strangers in the very home that once echoed with laughter, birthday candles, and the smell of Sunday dinners. The warmth had been replaced by something colder than any winter. And though my body was still healing, I felt an even deeper wound opening in my heart. The second day at home crawled. I moved from chair to window and back again, learning the distance of each room like a map I no longer owned. Liam and Claire spoke around me. Not to me. Every word sounded like a ledger. Every look felt like a count of what I cost. I tried to rest, but memory would not let me. It opened doors I had kept shut. I saw a skinny boy chasing a red bike on a cracked sidewalk. I had bought that bike after overtime shifts that left my palms raw. He yelled, "Dad, watch," and rode without training wheels. That night he slept on my chest. I would have given the world for one more night like that. College came like winter. Tuition notices piled on the table. I took extra contracts. I repaired roofs in March wind and poured concrete under July sun. A father does not complain. When the pressure crushed him and he left school, I told him to come home. We would figure it out together. I made soup in space. Then came the wedding. Claire wore white satin that glowed under church lights. I wrote a check I could not afford and smiled until my cheeks hurt. It was not about the money. It was about promise. Family would be stronger. Love would deepen. There were other moments I do not name. The landlord calling because rent had bounced. A bank manager asking me to discuss a loan I had co-signed. A tow truck hauling away a car in my name. I negotiated. I begged for time. I sold my truck, the one I had repaired with my own hands. I told no one. When they wanted to move near better schools, I gave them the down payment. I remember the weight of the envelope and the way my fingers shook when I placed it in his palm. He said we would always have a place at their table. He said, when you are old, I will be there. We took a photo on the porch. I kept it in my wallet until the sunshine on the paper wore thin. Now I watched Claire line up shopping bags on that same porch. She laughed on the phone about a sale. Liam paced the hallway, speaking to a client. He stopped when he saw me. You should not sit near the draft, he said, and pointed to the far chair. The words were gentle. The eyes were not. I went to the far chair and closed my eyes. My chest stung. The stitches tugged. I breathed slow and counted to 4. The room smelled like lemon cleaner. Small sounds felt loud in a house where love had gone quiet. At noon I asked for help, heating the soup the doctor recommended. Claire said the microwave is on the counter like it has always been. She did not look up. I stood and steadied myself. The floor felt tilted. The bowl slipped in my hand. It shattered in the sink, and the sound made my heart jump. Claire sighed. Really? Now we need to buy another set. Liam frowned, as if I had broken a window on purpose. I picked out the pieces with shaking fingers. A cut opened on my thumb. Bright blood dotted the white porcelain. For a moment, the window gave me a different life. I saw my late wife, Elise, standing there with a towel over her shoulder, humming something soft. She would have touched my wrist and said, "Sit down." She would have made a new bowl and placed a napkin in my hand like a blessing. I leaned on the counter until the ache eased. I whispered her name so the memory would not leave. In the evening, Liam laid a stack of envelopes on the table. Dad. Utilities went up again. We cannot keep paying everything. I read each bill like a sentence in a language I did not speak. I nodded and asked what they needed. He said, "You have savings. You have equity. Maybe it is time to contribute more." Claire added that her mother's friends charge rent when parents move in. It teaches boundaries. I heard myself say, "I will do what is right." I did not tell them what I had already done. I did not tell them about the insurance Elise left and the papers with my careful signature that had kept this roof over their heads more than once. I folded the bills and set them back in their neat stack. The room felt colder. Before bed, I paused at the photos. Liam at 5 with cake on his chin. A summer trip under a sky full of stars. The wedding day. In each picture, I saw a man who believed love came back in the same shape it was given. I touched the glass and felt only dust. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed and studied my hands. They had built decks and fences. They had soothed fevers and carried furniture up narrow stairs, so young backs would not ache. They trembled. Not from weakness, but because I had finally named what was happening. Gratitude had turned to expectation. Expectation had hardened into entitlement. Entitlement had become contempt. That night I slept in pieces, when dawn pressed pale light across the floor. One thought waited like a knock on the door. If love can be forgotten this easily, then kindness must be written down. I would protect myself the way I had protected everyone else. I would find the papers that could remind this house where it came from. The tension finally broke on the 4th evening. I had tried to stay quiet, to move softly around the edges of their lives. But silence only fed their disdain. That night, as the sun dipped behind the houses and shadows stretched long across the living room, Liam's voice carried sharp through the air. "Dad, you cannot keep expecting us to drop everything for you," he said. Claire nodded beside him. Her arms crossed like a barricade. "You chose to move in here. We didn't sign up to babysit." I was sitting in the same recliner I had once bought for their wedding gift. My chest throbbed with each breath. But I straightened anyway. I had not chosen this lightly. My doctor insisted I not live alone while recovering. And yet the people who should have been my comfort had turned into judges and jailers. Claire leaned forward. "If you really want to help, maybe you should consider signing over the rest of the house. That way we can refinance, pay these bills, and not feel like we're drowning." Her words struck harder than the surgeon's scalpel. Not feel like we're drowning as though I were the weight dragging them under. Not the man who had kept them afloat for years. I stared at Liam. He avoided my eyes. My voice came out steady but low. "This house was bought with years of my work. With your mother's careful saving. It is not something you demand like pocket change," Liam muttered. "Maybe it's time you realize the world doesn't revolve around you." Something inside me cracked. I rose too quickly. Pain tearing across my chest like fire. The room swam, but I forced myself to stand. I looked at my son, my only child, and saw not the boy I had raised, but a man who measured me in bills and burdens. I remembered Elise's voice in our first kitchen. "We build this home for love, not for profit." I whispered her name, and Claire rolled her eyes. Liam shook his head. "This is exhausting. Dad, you should think about a care facility, at least there. People are paid to deal with you." The word facility rang like a verdict. I steadied myself on the armrest. Each heartbeat a hammer against my ribs. Paid to deal with you. I had given them everything. And now my value was reduced to a contract someone else might sign. I walked toward the hallway. Slow but deliberate. Liam called after me. "Where are you going?" I answered without turning. To think about the kind of man I need to be now. The house grew quiet behind me. But it was not peace. It was the silence of a battlefield before the next strike. In my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, sweat damp on my temples. Family photographs lined the dresser, smiling faces from birthdays, vacations, graduations. They looked like strangers in borrowed skin. I pressed my hand to my chest and felt both the stitches of surgery and the raw wound of betrayal. That night I knew with certainty, this could not continue. If I remained silent, I would fade into the background until they pushed me out completely. If I spoke, there would be war. Either way, the home I had built was no longer mine. But I was not ready to surrender. Not yet. Morning light slid across the blinds when I made my decision. The house was quiet, but not with peace. Quiet like a predator waiting. My body was fragile, yet my mind felt sharper than it had in weeks. I pulled the nightstand drawer open and reached for the small leather book, where I kept phone numbers too important to lose. One name stared back at me, Mr. Wallace, my attorney for more than 20 years. I dialed with trembling fingers. The ring seemed endless until his calm voice answered. Samuel, I have not heard from you in years. What happened? I swallowed hard. Wallace, I need to know if the deed transfer I signed over to Liam has protections. I might have made a mistake. He paused, then said he would come by that morning. I thanked him before my courage could falter. Hanging up, I felt a pulse of strength return. For once, I was not alone. 2 hours later, his gray sedan pulled into the driveway. I could see him through the window, neat suit, briefcase. A man who still believed in order. He shook my hand gently, noticing the weakness in my grip. You look worn. Samuel, sit. Let me help you. We settled at the dining table, sunlight catching the edges of the papers he spread before me. I explained everything. The cruelty, the dismissiveness, the late-night talk of nursing homes. His face tightened. That is unacceptable. You gave them generosity, and they have turned it into entitlement. Let us look at the documents. He read line after line, his pen moving, lips pressing together. Finally, he tapped a paragraph with authority. Here, you retained conditional ownership if they fail to provide care, or if circumstances change materially. The property reverts back to you. I blinked, hardly believing. Are you saying I still have rights? Wallace adjusted his glasses. You do. And strong ones. If we document their neglect, if we show they've broken the promise of support, you can reclaim the home legally. It would take notice and paperwork, but it is entirely possible. The words struck me like air filling starved lungs. I had not lost everything. The law still remembered what family had chosen to forget. We spoke for nearly an hour. He explained affidavits, witness statements, timelines. He urged me to keep notes of every slight, every refusal, every cruel word. He said truth written down carries weight in court. Before leaving, he rested a hand on my shoulder. Samuel, you are not powerless. Do not let them convince you otherwise. When his car disappeared down the street, I sat back and felt something shift inside me. Not joy. Not yet. But the spark of dignity I thought surgery had cut away began to flicker again. The house around me looked different now, not just walls where I was unwelcome, but a place still tied to me by law, by Elise's memory, by the years of sacrifice no one could erase. I knew then this battle would not just be about survival. It would be about reclaiming what was mine, about reminding Liam and Claire that a father is not disposable. I closed my eyes, steadied my breath, and whispered to my late wife, Elise, I am not done fighting. I decided to test the ground the way a man tests ice in late winter, one careful step at a time. Wallace said to write everything down. He said truth on paper keeps its shape when voices start to bend. So I kept a small notebook in my pocket. A cheap spiral with a bent cover. Before breakfast, I asked for help with the kettle. My hands shook when I tried to lift it. Claire did not look up from her tablet. You are fine. Sam. Exercise is good for your recovery. The word fine scratched. I set the kettle down and noted the time. 7:21. Refusal to help. At 9, I asked Liam to walk with me to the mailbox. The doctor wanted short walks. The sidewalk had a lip that could catch a toe. He did not look up from his laptop. You will be okay. Go slow. Headphones on. I wrote it down. 9:03. Declined to assist. At noon, the pain spiked under my sternum. I asked Claire to hand me the pill bottle on the top shelf. She pointed. Step stool is in the pantry. I reached for it and felt the room tilt. I held the counter until the dizziness passed. I wrote again. 12:12. Refusal. Suggested stool. I told myself this was evidence. Not humiliation, but it felt like both. I tried one more time. Gentle and plain. Would you heat the soup from the fridge? Claire opened the door, stared at the shelves, and said, We are out. I knew there were containers behind the milk. She closed the door and went upstairs. I wrote, and my pen left a small tear in the paper. A storm rolled over the neighborhood. I waved to Mrs. Avery across the street and felt the stitches tug. When I turned, Liam was behind me. He glanced at the notebook in my palm. What is that? Notes, I said. From the doctor. He reached for it. I stepped back and pain traced a hot line across my chest. You are making us look bad, he said. You are the one turning this dramatic. Claire came down the stairs. What is dramatic? She saw the notebook and smiled the way people smile at a child who has spilled juice. What are you writing? Sam. A memoir. I slipped the notebook away. At dinner, I asked for help carrying a pot of pasta to the sink. Liam leaned back and said, Careful, Claire said. He likes to act helpless when we are here. I set the pot down, crooked. Boiling water spilled across the counter. I wrote with shaky letters. 6:31. Refusal. Near scald. When the rain stopped, Liam stood by the hall and said, We need to talk about boundaries. He reached into my pocket and took my phone. His hand was quick. You have been calling people behind our backs. You are making problems that are not there. We will keep this for the night so you can rest. Give it back, I said. He shook his head. Claire stepped between us. You keep agitating yourself. That is why you are not healing. You need to calm down. Her voice was smooth. The words were a cage. They guided me down the hall. I did not resist. In my room, Claire opened the door and gestured inside as if to a guest. I stepped in. The door clicked. A key turned. I reached for the knob and felt the hard stop of the lock. For a moment, I could not find my breath. I knocked once. Liam's voice came through the wood. Even and distant. Sleep. Dad, you are confused and you need rest. We will check on you later. I sat on the bed and pressed both hands to my chest the way the nurse had shown me. The house was quiet except for the faint sound of a game show. I looked for the notebook. It was still in my pocket. My phone was gone. But not my record. I tore a page from the back in case the rest was taken. I wrote slowly. 7:42. Door locked from outside. Phone confiscated. Reason given. Rest. I added Wallace's number and the name of our street officer from a card on my dresser. Time sagged. A breeze pushed at the curtain. I thought of Elise walking hospital halls the night Liam was born. She told me that love is a decision you renew each day. I whispered to her in the dark. I am renewing my decision to live. I crossed to the window. The drop to the ground was farther than I liked. and the soil below was hard. I measured the distance, then shook my head. Not tonight, not with stitches that still ached. I would not gamble my life because someone else had slammed a door. I went back to the bed and wrote one more line. Plan. Wait for daylight. Conserve strength. Keep record. Ask for water and assistance again in the morning. Document exact words. Seek witness if possible. I slid the notebook into the pillowcase and lay back. My hands were steady now. There was fear in me, and a grief that felt like winter. But there was something else under it, the quiet that holds a river in its banks when the thaw begins. I breathed the way the nurse taught me. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Somewhere in the house, a lock sat between me and the people I had loved most. But under my cheek was a thin book full of lines that could not be argued away. In the morning, I would open a new page. The next morning brought no peace. The lock turned only when Liam decided to open it. And he carried my phone in his hand like a prize. You need to stop making us the villains. Dad, he said. Claire stood behind him, nodding. Her eyes were cold. If you keep acting like this, people will think you're losing your mind. I asked for the phone. He tucked it in his pocket. Later. Focus on resting. The words sounded kind, but the weight behind them was control. My chest ached, not just from the healing scar, but from the realization that I was a prisoner in the house I had built. By noon, I tested them again. Could you bring me a glass of water? Claire raised her brows. You're mobile. Walk to the sink. The bitterness in her tone was worse than the thirst. I steadied myself on the counter, poured the glass, and wrote in the notebook, refusal, dismissive. That afternoon, the world shifted. A knock at the window startled me. Outside, kneeling in her garden, was my neighbor, Mrs. Grant. She waved. Concerned, I pushed the window open and whispered, "Help me." Her face went pale. "What's wrong?" I told her quickly. They locked me in, took my phone. Won't help me. Please, call the police. She hesitated only a second before pulling her cell from her apron pocket. I heard her speak to dispatch. Her voice firm. Elderly man. Recent surgery. Possibly being confined against his will. The words cut the air like a lifeline. Relief flooded through me. Help was finally on its way. Inside. Footsteps grew loud. Liam burst into the room. Face tight. Why were you yelling? I stayed calm. I asked the neighbor to call for help. His jaw clenched. Claire appeared behind him, whispering, "If officers come, remember." He's confused. Anesthesia. Recovery. They rehearsed the lie in front of me, confident it would hold. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the street. 2 officers knocked at the door. Claire hurried to greet them. Voice syrup sweet. "Good evening. Officers, we're caring for my father-in-law. He's just had surgery, and he's been very confused. Sometimes he thinks we're against him." I stepped forward, heart pounding. "Officers," I said, my voice shaking but clear. They locked me in my bedroom, took my phone, refused me basic care. This is my home. They're trying to control me. The officers glanced around. The house looked ordinary. No broken furniture. No bruises visible. Claire produced my phone from her pocket. He left it charging on the counter. She said smoothly, "We were just trying to help him." Liam added, "The medication makes him imagine things. He's been writing strange notes." One officer asked gently, "Mr. Hayes, are you sure? Pain medication can cause confusion." I lifted the notebook from my pocket. My handwriting filled the pages with times, refusals, details of every neglect. But before I could hand it over, Claire's voice cut in. He's been scribbling nonsense all week. The officers exchanged looks. They asked me if I felt safe. I answered, no. Not when they lock me in and lie about it. Claire gasped, and hand to her chest, like an actress. He's disoriented. Please, don't upset him. Liam nodded solemnly. We love him. We're just doing our best. After more questions, the officers softened their tone. Mr. Hayes, we can't confirm a crime tonight. If you feel unsafe, call again. They left with polite nods, their notepads half filled, their eyes already doubtful. The patrol car rolled away, and silence settled heavier than before. The moment the door shut, Liam's mask fell. That was very stupid, Dad. His words were low, sharp. Claire crossed her arms. You embarrassed us in front of the whole street. You want people to think we abuse you? Fine, but you'll regret it. They locked my door again that night. But now they took more than my phone. They searched drawers, carried away envelopes and documents. My strength was limited, but my mind raced. The police believed them this time. Next time, I would need undeniable proof. I sat by the window in the dark, the notebook pressed to my chest. The betrayal burned deeper than the wound in my sternum. My own son had turned the world upside down, making me the liar, the fool. Outside, Mrs. Grant's porch light glowed steady. Somewhere beyond these walls, truth still existed. I just had to reach it. I whispered to Elise's memory, I will not let them erase me. And in that whisper was the seed of resolve that no locked door could break. I waited until the house slipped into its careless rhythm. Television laughter, water in the pipes, a cupboard door. Then a long quiet. The lock on my room held, but the window offered choices. I pushed it open an inch at a time, testing each sound the way a soldier tests ground before a step. Night air found my scar and made it sting. I sat on the sill and studied the drop. The flower bed below looked forgiving. The concrete path did not. I tied my bedsheet to the dresser leg and eased my weight onto it. My chest flashed with pain. I counted like the nurse had taught me and lowered my right foot. Then my left. The knot slipped, but not enough to fail. When my feet met soil, I whispered a thank you to the dark. I moved along the siding to avoid the security light near the garage. My fingers traced paint I had rolled last summer. Behind the spigot, a flat river stone hid the spare key, still wrapped in plastic. I slid it into my pocket and skirted the hedge to the street. Mrs. Grant's porch light glowed. I lifted my hand in a small salute. Someone had believed me. That counted. I reached the corner and opened a ride app, hands trembling as I typed. The driver did not speak. He looked at my face in the mirror and turned the radio down. When he asked for an address, I said the words like a prayer. Wallace and Doyle, attorneys at law. The office smelled like lemon polish and old victories. Wallace met me at the elevators in shirt sleeves, tie loose. He took in my appearance with one long look and guided me to a chair. We will make this right. Samuel, tell me everything. I set the notebook on his desk. Page after page. Times, refusals, the lock, the phone, the police who believed their performance. He read in silence, then tapped the margin with a forefinger that might as well have been a gavel. This is ample. We proceed. He opened the deed. The reversionary clause sat there calm as winter text. He placed a yellow pad beside it and dictated to his assistant through the intercom. Notice of gift revocation. Grounds include failure to provide reasonable care, hostile environment during medical recovery, and unlawful confinement. Prepare affidavit templates for Mr. Hayes and for Mrs. Grant. Request a declaration from his cardiologist regarding post-operative needs. Each sentence felt like a plank laid across floodwater. I could see a way back to myself. You must not return tonight, he said. Stay at the motel on 5th. Rest. We move at first light. He wrote the address and handed me a company card with a limit he trusted me not to test. I slept in a room that smelled of bleach and truck stop coffee. The mattress was thin. The relief was thick. At dawn I returned. Wallace was already there. Tie straight. Documents stacked like a small city. He walked me through each page. Steady and patient. The notice. The affidavit. The instruction to the process server. Once served, the 30-day clock would begin. If they resisted, he would seek a restraining order and a police standby. We would change locks legally, not impulsively. He asked, "Do you want them to hear this from you or from a knock at the door?" I pictured Liam's folded arms and Claire's bright, hard smile. "Let the door speak," I said. Let paper hold the words I could not say without breaking. His assistant returned with a neat stack. Blue-backed. Notarized. Firm with stamps and seals. Wallace placed his palm on the top copy and met my eyes. This is the line. Samuel, on this side is your life with dignity. I signed. The pen was heavier than any hammer I had lifted. My hand shook. But the signature held. Wallace called the process server and gave clear instructions. "Go home now," he said. "But do not engage. Pack the items you need. When they are served, speak only to the paper. The law will carry your voice the rest of the way." I took a cab back to the street that had minted my best memories and my worst hours. I used the spare key to enter by the side door. The house was quiet. In my room, I gathered what Elise would have told me to take first. The photo of us at the canyon, the insurance file in the locked box, the watch my father gave me when Liam was born. From the hallway came the hum of a hairdryer. Claire. Footsteps crossed the kitchen and stopped. Liam looked into my room, eyebrows lifting in surprise that turned fast into contempt. "Where were you?" His voice tried to sound casual. It failed. I slipped the notebook into my bag and steadied myself. "Out," I said, taking my life back one appointment at a time. He laughed once. Short and sharp. "You will not like how this ends, Dad." I met his stare. "Neither will you." The doorbell rang. The sound braided the air with a new kind of tension. Claire called. "Can you get that?" Liam did not move. The bell rang again. Patient and official. The way daylight arrives, whether you invite it or not. Wallace had promised morning. Morning had arrived. The knock grew louder. Not rushed, but firm. The rhythm of someone who knew they had authority. Liam glanced at me. Then at the door, Claire stepped into the hallway. Her hair still damp. Her face set in suspicion. "Who is that at this hour?" she asked. I didn't answer. My chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. And I clutched the bag against my side as if it were a shield. The third knock came. Liam finally moved, muttering, "This better not be another one of your games, Dad." He pulled open the door. A man in a dark jacket and tie stood there, a folder in hand. "Good morning. I'm a licensed process server. I have documents for Samuel Hayes's residence." Liam frowned. "What kind of documents?" The man's voice was steady. "Legal notice regarding property ownership. I need to hand these directly to the parties residing here." Claire stepped forward. Irritation, giving way to unease. She took the papers, her eyes scanning the bold print at the top. Notice of gift revocation. Her mouth fell open. Liam ripped the stack from her hands, flipping pages as if speed could change what was written. "What is this supposed to mean?" I demanded, turning to me. I steadied myself against the doorway, my scar aching with every heartbeat. It means the home you've treated like yours reverts back to me. By law. By my right. Claire's voice rose, high and sharp. You can't do this. We live here. We've built our lives here. She gestured wildly at the walls, the furniture, the very floor. But I shook my head. You built your lives on my sacrifices, and you paid them back with cruelty. You locked me in my own room. You told neighbors and police that I was confused, unstable. You forgot that truth leaves marks. And I kept every one. Liam's face turned red. You think some lawyer and a pile of papers can erase us? He stepped closer, looming over me. But I didn't flinch. 30 days, I said, my voice steady. That's what you have. 30 days to pack, to leave, to build something of your own without leaning on me. For a moment, silence filled the air like thunder waiting to fall. Then Claire's composure cracked. Tears welled. But they were not soft tears of regret. They were angry, hot, desperate. You'd put your own son out on the street? After everything? My chest tightened. But not from guilt. After everything? After I carried his debts. After I signed for loans. After I gave him this very roof, I pressed my palm to the table, grounding myself. Yes. Because you chose to treat me as a burden, not as family. Liam slammed the folder shut. His jaw clenched so tight the muscle twitched. We're not leaving. You can't force us. I met his glare with a quiet fire. If you test me, the court will. And you will learn the hard way that entitlement has no defense. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker in his eyes. He threw the papers on the counter, pages fanning out across bills and coffee mugs. Claire whispered, "This isn't real." He wouldn't. He can't. But her hands trembled as she tried to gather the scattered sheets. I turned and walked toward the living room window. Outside, the oak tree stood as it always had, weathering seasons, bending but never breaking. My reflection in the glass looked older, lined, stitched, but steady, strong enough to see this through. Behind me, their voices rose accusations, pleas, threats all tangled. But I no longer heard only their noise. I heard the sound of my own resolve, clear as the pen strokes that had carried my name across Wallace's documents. This was not just about a house. It was about dignity reclaimed. 30 days. The number echoed like a clock beginning its final countdown. I waited until their anger burned low. Then I called them to the table. No raised voice. No lecture. Just my hands on a manila folder. Claire sat stiff, lips pressed thin. Liam stood with folded arms, trying to look taller than his shame. You think paper makes you strong, he said. You think a court can replace family. I pushed the folder toward them. Open it, I said. Read the first page. Claire loosened the clasp. Insurance documents lay in neat order. Northwestern Mutual Life. Policy number. Beneficiary. Date of payout. The date matched the month we buried Elise. What is this? Claire whispered. It is the money your mother left when cancer took her breath. She paid that policy for 20 years. She made me promise to keep our family safe. This house was bought with her last gift. Liam stared at the numbers like a foreign language. You told me you had savings. I did. I also had a wife who planned for the worst so her family would not drown. I did not tell you because I did not want every wall to feel like her absence. I wanted her to live here through our kindness. The room went still. Claire folded the first document back, as if covering a wound. Liam's fingers trembled over the signature line. He traced his mother's name as though touch could wake the ink. That money built this roof. I said, That money bought the key you use without thinking. When you locked me in my bedroom, you locked the man your mother trusted to protect this home. When you told the police I was confused, you turned her promise into a lie. I held up a photo from the folder. Elise in a blue dress at the canyon. Hair caught mid-wind. She wanted a porch where sunlight would pool in the mornings. A yard with a tree for a tire swing. A kitchen where Thanksgiving would never feel small. Look around. Everything she dreamed became solid. And you turned it against the person who made it possible. Claire began to cry. Not the hot tears of anger. The other kind. The ones that empty a body until it must be rebuilt. I did not know, she said. I did not know. Liam sank into the chair like a structure losing a beam. Dad. He said. Then stopped. He held the photo to his chest. I could see the child in his shoulders. I am not asking for an apology, I said. I am asking for truth. The truth is that love costs. It cost your mother her last months of comfort to keep paying that premium. It cost me my pride to sign a deed that still protected you when I gave you this house. It costs me now to tell you that you have 30 days to go. He stared at the notice. 30 days whispered back at him. He lifted his eyes. Where will we go? I do not know. But I know this. You will leave with the knowledge of what you almost erased. You will carry your mother's name like a weight until it turns back into a promise. Claire wiped her face and nodded through the tears. We were cruel, she said. We were lazy. We made our comfort the only God in this house. I cannot ask you to forgive me. I can only tell you I see it now. Liam looked at me the way a drowning man looks at shore he cannot reach. Dad, I asked you for water the day you came home. I said a thing a son should never say. I made your surgery small, your pain smaller, and my inconvenience large. I do not deserve this roof. No, I said. Today, you do not. He bowed his head. His hands closed around the photo until the edges bent. When he looked up again, his face was older. We will pack. We will go. But tell me one thing. Did Mom know I would turn out like this? Your mother believed in your better self. So do I. Belief is not the same as rescue. You will have to swim. He nodded. The sound he made next was yes and sorry stitched into one syllable. Claire took his hand. For the first time since the hospital. The house felt almost like a place where people learned. I slid the papers back into the folder. Keep one page, I said, handing them a copy of the receipt. Frame it. Let it hang wherever you live next. Let it watch you when you choose the easy answer over the right one. We stood. The moment did not fix what was broken, but it stopped the breaking. As they walked down the hallway to start sorting their lives into boxes, I sat with Elise's photo and let my chest rise and fall. Not revenge, just truth. In the doorway, Liam turned. May I come back one day when I have earned it? One day, I said. Not soon, but one day. He nodded. Claire whispered, thank you, without expecting a reply. When I was alone again, I spread the insurance papers on the table. I traced the date with my thumb. I let myself cry quiet tears that do not ask to be seen. The house listened. It knew whose name had built it. It remembered. Outside, the oak shifted in a small wind. Leaves, speaking in a language we used to know. I breathed with it. Slow and even, tasting salt and relief. The house felt lighter, as if a window had opened. 30 days had started. But the clock inside me, the one that had been counting down to despair, finally slowed. I closed the folder and set a glass of water beside it. For Elise. For the boy who might yet become a man. For the man I still have time to be. The house grew quieter as the days slipped by. No more sharp laughter echoing from the television. No more heavy footsteps up and down the hallway. Instead, there was the scraping of boxes, the thud of tape pulled from its roll, the muffled voices of Liam and Claire trying to pack away their lives into cardboard squares. I sat in my chair by the window, the same spot where I had once watched Liam chase fireflies with Elise cheering him on. Now I watched shadows moving between rooms, their figures bent under the weight of belongings and guilt. Each box carried not only clothes and books, but the burden of choices they could never undo. Claire approached me on the second day. Her eyes were swollen, her voice hesitant. "Mr. Hayes, I need to say this." I looked at her, the woman who had once called me Dad with warmth, now speaking as if we were strangers. "I'm sorry for what I did, for what we did. We thought only of ourselves. We forgot the roof over our heads was built with sacrifice. We forgot to love you when you needed it most." Her words cracked something inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the ache of hearing what I had waited months to hear. I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. She left the room, wiping her face on her sleeve. Liam came later. He stood in the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets like a boy caught lying. "Dad, I've been going over everything you showed us, the insurance papers, the deeds, the years I ignored. I don't know who I was these past months. I don't know how I looked at you and saw burden instead of father." His voice broke. "I don't deserve another chance, but I'll spend the rest of my life hoping for one." I stared at him. My son, my only child, the boy I once carried on my shoulders through summer parades, now stood before me, carrying nothing but regret. "You can change," I said quietly, "but change is not a word. It is work, and it is not my work anymore. It is yours." He nodded slowly, like a man accepting a sentence. "I'll do it," he whispered. The third day. The last of the boxes stood stacked by the door. Their car was loaded, the trunk straining under luggage. Claire clutched the keys that had once dangled from my belt. She hesitated, then placed them on the table in front of me. Her hand lingered as though the metal burned. "These belong to you," she said softly. I picked them up. They were warm from her touch, but they had always been mine. I let them rest in my palm, heavy with memory, then slipped them into my pocket. Liam stepped forward. He extended his hand, his eyes rimmed with red. "I take full responsibility, Dad, for the lies, the neglect, the cruelty." I supported Claire's sharp words. I locked that door. "I turned away when you asked for help. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I shook his hand once. "Now you know what it means to lose a home," I said. His shoulders sagged, as if those words weighed more than the boxes in his car. They walked slowly to the door. Claire turned once more. "I hope one day we can show you we've learned." Her voice was thin, nearly breaking. Liam paused at the threshold. "Will you ever forgive us?" "That's not the question," I said. "The question is whether you will remember this lesson long enough to live differently." The door closed with a soft click that sounded like finality. I stayed in my chair until the car's engine faded down the street. Silence returned. Not the silence of anger, but the silence of a wound beginning to heal. I looked at Elise's photo on the mantel. Her smile seemed to hold me upright. Justice had been served. Dignity reclaimed. They were gone. But her presence remained. I whispered. "We kept the promise. Love. The house is safe." I rose, slow but steady, and walked through the rooms. No boxes. No voices. Only air that finally felt mine again. The weight of betrayal had lifted. What remained was sorrow. Yes, but also a peace I had not tasted in years. The kind of peace that lets a man breathe without apology. Morning light filled the rooms as if the house were breathing again. The air felt new. The silence was kind. I stood in the hallway and listened to the hum of the heater. The soft tick of the kitchen clock. The rain beginning on the porch roof. Small sounds. Honest ones. I walked without rushing. My chest still ached. But the pain had changed. It no longer felt like a warning. It felt like a scar learning to lie flat. In the kitchen, I washed a single glass and set it to dry. I wiped the counter with care. I opened the window and let cold air move past the curtains. On the table lay the folder I had kept near me for days. The insurance papers. The deed. The notice that had turned a storm into a path. I closed the folder and slid it onto the shelf above the stove. I did not need to see it to know my life had weight again. Paper had done what love could not in this season. It had held the line. I made tea and carried it to the chair by the window. The oak outside wore a wet shine. Drops hung from every branch like beads. Years ago, I had tied a tire swing there. Liam used to fly toward the sky and shout for me to push harder. I pushed until his laughter broke into hiccups. My hands remember that boy. My hands also remember the door that clicked shut on my breath. Memory can hold both. I thought about calling him. I thought about asking if they had found a place. If they had eaten. If he was sleeping. Worry and anger argued in my chest. I let them talk until they were tired. Then I wrote him a note instead, short. True. I love you. Learn from this. When you are ready, write back. I placed the note in a drawer with a stamp and an envelope. I would mail it when my hands stopped shaking. The rain grew steady. I moved through the rooms and checked locks and lights. I made a simple soup. I ate at the counter. I cleaned the bowl and put it away. Ordinary work. Felt holy. Every small task was a way to tell the house we were safe. In the afternoon, Mrs. Grant knocked. She stood on the porch with a casserole and a shy smile. I thanked her and invited her in. She did not ask for details. She only asked how I was healing. We talked about the rain and the dog she might adopt and the herbs that will do well in spring. When she left, the kitchen felt warmer. Kindness does that. It leaves heat behind. I took the photo of Elise from the mantel and brought it to the table. I spoke to her as I often do when the day bends. I told her the house was quiet. I told her about the oak and the rain and the neighbor with the casserole. I told her the papers had done their job. I told her our boy had begun to see himself. I did not ask for signs. Grief is not a machine that pays out on demand. I only placed the photo back and touched the glass. Evening came. I turned on the porch light. I stood in the doorway and watched water run along the curb. Past driveways and down toward the storm drain. Life moves like that. It gathers. It spills. It finds a way. I breathed and felt the breath sit deeper. I was home. Later, I wrote in the notebook that had saved me from doubt. Not the old record of refusals. A new page. I listed the things I was grateful for. The surgeon who stitched me. The attorney who read slowly. The neighbor who believed my voice. The way tea warms both hands. The roof that holds. Elisa's name. I placed the notebook with the folder. Then I turned off the lights and went to my room. The sheets were clean. The pillow smelled like detergent and fresh air. I lay down and waited for pain. None came that I could not carry. I listened to rain and to the quiet inside a home that had found its owner again. Before sleep, I pictured a day months from now. The oak in full leaf. The swing back on its rope. Perhaps a child's laughter from the yard next door. Perhaps a letter in the mailbox with my name on the front and my son's name on the back. Perhaps he will write that he has found work he does with pride. That he cooks dinner with his own hands. That he treats the people in his life with gentleness. That he wants to talk. I will read such a letter on the porch and feel my heart ease in a new way. If that day does not come, I will still live as a man who kept faith. I will tend this house. I will mend what can be mended. I will keep a chair ready by the window and a glass ready at the sink. I will be a river again. But I will keep my banks strong. I turned off the lamp and let the dark settle. The house creaked once, like a tired body stretching. I said goodnight to Elise. I said goodnight to the boy who might yet learn. I said goodnight to the man I was before and to the man I am now. Then I slept. And the rain kept its soft time on the roof. A steady hand telling me that some things, at last, were right.